How would you like to have a super stable action camera that follows the subject automatically and has a really cool hyperlapse effect? You're watching 360 Rumors. My name is Mick, and this is the most detailed look with the Rylo camera. We're going to be brutally honest. We're going to look at all its strengths and weaknesses so you can make an informed decision. Now, if YouTube recommended this video to you, chances are it's because you're someone who's logical, no nonsense, and you just want to stick to the facts. So go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Don't worry, this video will keep playing. In this video, I'm going to talk about several things. First, I'm going to give you a background on Rylo and why it's a little bit controversial. Then I'm going to show you an unboxing video. I haven't done one in a while, but this one is worth it. Then I'll talk about its headline features first, the things that really stand out about the Rylo. Then we'll go into a more detailed look at the Rylo, starting out with its shooting controls. Then we're going to talk about its post-processing workflow. And then finally we'll move on to image quality. And I'm also going to be talking about how the Rylo compares to another similar 360 camera, the Insta360 One. I'll tell you the pros and cons. Finally, I'll conclude with who this camera is for. Rylo came out seemingly from nowhere, and it's a startup company based in San Francisco. It's made by engineers who came from Apple and Instagram. And when I first saw this product, it looked really promising. So the controversy came when I was looking into this camera, trying to find out more about it. And then I happened to see their Amazon listing where they suddenly had 36 product reviews, even though at that time Rylo hadn't been released. And in these reviews, they were all like 100% positive, all of them 5 stars, and all of them like kind of followed like a template. And more than half of those reviews were from people who had never reviewed the product before, and a few had like reviewed one other totally unrelated product, like a shoe or a bag or something weird like that. Controversy aside, let's forget about that. Let's just focus on the actual product itself, see if it's good enough or does it actually live up to its marketing. So here's an unboxing. Their packaging is very impressive, but of course, camera is nothing without the actual performance. And this one has really cool headline features. Let's talk about them. Headline feature number 1 is this ability to convert 360 video into full HD video. And to people who haven't seen that effect before, they come away very impressed because it looks like, there's this invisible flying camera that's taking a video of you, and it can do like smooth panning movements, and you can quote unquote shoot first and point later. So it looks really cool. Another cool feature of the Rylo is the tracking ability. So when you can shoot the 360 video, right? And then you can pick a subject, and then it's going to track that subject very accurately. And I've tried it, it really works. It's amazing, and it's very easy to use. It has this unique feature called FrontBack. So you got the reframed video, right? And then it's going to do like a little overlay, like a little picture-in-picture, where it's showing you, the shooter. And what that does is it shows your reaction to it. That's a perfect use for 360 cameras. As far as I know, they're the first one to implement this feature. It's really cool. Number 4. Image stabilization. This is something that they made a big deal out of in their promos. They're showing, like, you know, people like jogging, whatever, and then they switch to the stabilization. It's totally level. And here's the verdict is it's real. It's true that the stabilization is very solid. It's one of the best, if not the best, that I've seen in a consumer 360 camera. So it's amazing. Another headline feature is Hyperlapse. Hyperlapse is kind of like a time lapse, but usually there's movement, so it looks surreal. So now that you've seen the headline features of the Rylo, let's take a closer look at how to use it. So here's the Rylo. It's very simple. There are a couple buttons only. There's one on top. This is the power button as well as the shutter button. And there's another button, which is the mode button, and that's it. It's very easy to use. So you hold it down to turn it on. There's a little bit of vibration to give you haptic feedback that it's on. And then, you know, use between video and photo. It's very easy. To shoot a video, you simply take a video and then start, and then press it again to stop. And then for photo, same thing. You just switch modes, press the button, and it takes the photo. So as you see, the controls are super simple. Literally anyone can use it, even a child or even someone who's technophobic. They'll be able to use the Rylo. So the problem is that I think the controls are a little bit too simple. Let's talk about like some of the issues. First of all, there's no live preview. So on many 360 cameras, you can attach the camera to the phone or connect with it wirelessly. Then you're going to see a live preview of what the camera will capture. On the Rylo, that's not possible. You can't just connect it either by wire or wirelessly. There's nothing like that. So you're never really going to see what you're gonna shoot until you shoot it. The other thing is that you can't judge the exposure. You know, you won't know if the camera got the exposure right. It might be too bright or too dark. You'll never know. So if you can't judge the exposure, you might be wondering, can't you bracket it or use exposure compensation maybe? Well, that's the other thing. There is no exposure compensation. So there's no way to adjust the exposure or to kind of like hedge your bets by taking it overexposure, underexposure, normal. There's nothing like that. You're all on full auto everything. Another missing control is self-timer. It has none. So when I press the shutter here, it will just, you know, there's a 1 second delay and that's it. And if you're holding it like this, it's okay. That works. But if you have a longer selfie stick or the camera's on a tripod, it's going to be quite challenging to use it. Now let's talk about the post-processing workflow, like the things that you have to do after you shoot the video or photo and how you share them. So first thing you have to do is simply connect your camera to your smartphone. Right now only iOS supported, but in the future they're going to add Android. So then you'll see a message saying, like, asking if you want to connect with it, and you press allow, and it launches the Rylo app. Then you'll see the photos and videos that you take, and you simply tap on them to download. It's very quick at downloading photos. Even videos are pretty fast as well. Once you've downloaded a photo or video, you can switch to the phone tab here. Then you'll see the photos and videos that you've downloaded. You tap on it to look at it, and you're going to see the photo. And for video, same thing. Now let's look at the cool things you can do with it. First, you could edit it. You could trim the video by tapping on the edit button, and then you select trim here, and you simply select the start point and press start. So you move it to the where you want it to start. Let's say there, and then you tap the end, and then you move it to where you want it to end. Let's say there, and you press the check mark to end it, and you've trimmed the video. It's very simple. Next thing you can do is speed. You could adjust it by doing like a kind of like a travel lapse. If you move it really fast, for example, it will become a hyperlapse. So another thing you can do is adjust the stabilization. So you can tap on level, and you can, let's say the stabilization didn't turn out perfectly, then you can use this control to level it. And you can also, you know, if you took it upside down, if the camera was upside down, for example, it didn't stabilize correctly, you can tap on this to rotate it in any position. So those are the stabilization controls. Finally, there's crop, and you can choose whether you want landscape or square format or portrait, depending on how you want to present your video. Next, let's talk about the front back feature. So when you're watching the video, you could activate the front back, which is this button here, and when you activate it, you can see the opposite view over here, and you can change this. You could swipe that, and you could zoom in and out, like zoom in like that or zoom out like that. You can also change the shape of the front back overlay, so from round to this kind of like elongated view if you want to see like the upper body or like the whole person if it's really far. Another view is this half view, so it's like half front, half back. It's really cool. Another cool thing with the front back is that you can change where it is. So right now the front back view is on the right side. You could put it on the bottom for a portrait view, or on the left side. So now I wanted to show you the subject tracking capabilities of Rylo. The first thing you can do is tap on anything in the screen. Let's say this door, and then you hold up your finger there, and then you'll see two options. One says look here, the other one says follow this. So look here means that the video is going to face that direction. When you play the video, so it's going to face there. Now if you wanted to suddenly face here, you could hold the button here again, tap there and hold it, and then you tap look here. So now if you look at the timeline, it's going to move from this direction to the other direction. So you can delete a keyframe by tapping on the keyframe that you've added here, or there. So here you tap on the keyframe, then you'll see a little X, and you tap on that to remove it. Now let's look at the other tracking feature of Rylo called follow this. To use follow this, you simply tap on the subject, and then you tap on follow this, and it's going to begin following the subject. At the point where you want to stop, just tap the screen again. At that point, you can switch to a different subject. Hold your finger again, tap on follow this, and it's begin tracking. Tap on the screen to stop. And the result is that it will seamlessly transition from one subject to another. Now if you look at the timeline, there are white dots there that represent the keyframes for follow this. So you simply, to erase them, you simply tap on the white dot, and then there'll be a little X above it. So you tap on the X to delete that keyframe for follow this. Here's a tip. You can switch back and forth between look here and follow this, but you can only use one of them at a time. The other thing is that when you're using front back, you can't use look here or follow this, but you can use follow this and look here in combination with hyperlapse. So when you're done editing your video, you can share it by tapping on this button on the upper right corner. Just tap on that, and you can choose whether to share it as a cropped video or a 360 video. You can also select whether to turn audio on or off, and then you press continue and it's gonna save the video. So let's talk about the image quality of the Rylo. The sharpness is very good, and not only is it sharp in the middle of the frame, but also throughout the frame, even near the stitch line. In terms of the level of detail, I would say it's like kind of like Insta360 One for the videos, and for photos it's less detailed than, let's say, the Xiaomi, but more detailed than, you know, let's say the Theta. In terms of dynamic range, I like the highlight range. It's very good. Shadow range is not so good. The shadows have very little detail. If there's like a high contrast situation and there's something in the shadows, you're not going to see the detail there. There's very minimal chromatic aberration, and the flare resistance is also very good. It's not completely immune from flare, but there are very few flare artifacts. When it does have flare, it doesn't totally lose the contrast. So let's talk about stitching quality. For videos, it's very good. It's very smooth, and most of the time you hardly notice it, which is ideal. It also has a very good blend of the exposure from one lens to another. So the colors and exposure are consistent, so great job on that. Now, unfortunately for photos, the stitching is somehow like not aligned. It doesn't look aligned perfectly, at least on my camera. So for photos, you will notice the stitch line, not because they're like misaligned. And in terms of colors, it's undersaturated. This is kind of unusual because a lot of cameras go overboard and they are too saturated. This one is actually undersaturated, so it's unusual in that aspect. Finally, let's talk about low light performance. That is one of the weaknesses of the Rylo. Even in not too dark conditions, you're going to start to see a lot of noise and grain. So let's say you like the Rylo, and especially its features such as its stabilization, the overcapture style video, and the subject tracking, but you wanted a camera that costs a little bit less. Well, there's a camera that's kind of like that, which is the Insta360 One. So here's a comparison between the Rylo and the Insta360 One. First, let's talk about their similarities. They're both compact cameras that are compatible with iPhone right now, and in the future will have Android capability. In the case of the Insta360 One, their Android version is coming out around December 15, whereas with Rylo, it's expected early 2018. In terms of their features, they both have overcapture style videos, they both are 4K, they both have stabilization, they both have subject tracking. Let's talk about their specifications. The Rylo has an aperture of f2.8, whereas the Insta360 aperture is f2.2. So the Insta360 aperture is brighter by 2/3 stops. So that means the Insta360 gets around 67% more light. In terms of the video resolution, they're both 4K. For photo resolution, the Rylo's resolution is 6000 by 3000, so that's 18 megapixels, whereas with Insta360 the resolution is 6912 by 3456, so that's a 34% higher resolution, photo resolution than the Rylo. How do they perform in real life? Like, which one is better in real life? And so I took both of them with me to a variety of shooting conditions, both outdoors and indoors. And you know, I shot with them at a kids party. I even took them to a bounce house where I got to test the stabilization, and here's what I found. So the Rylo has better stabilization than the Insta360 They both have level videos that are very easy to watch, and they look, you know, totally level. But with the Insta360 One, whenever there's movement, there's a slight blur in the video. Whereas with the Rylo, no matter how I move the camera, the video looked like as if it was totally on a gimbal. So for that reason, I would say the Rylo has better stabilization. The second advantage of the Rylo is the tracking. Tracking on the Rylo is a lot easier to use. You simply have to point at the target and you hold it down and it will stick to that target. With the Insta360 One, there's this rectangle. You kind of have to resize it, and sometimes when I'm resizing it, it doesn't pick up my finger movement, and it thinks I'm trying to move the rectangle around. So it's a little bit frustrating sometimes. Also, the Rylo can follow the subject better. It can stick with it and can distinguish it from the background more accurately than the Insta360 One in the tests that I did. The third advantage of the Rylo is the FrontBack feature. So like I said, this is a unique feature of the Rylo. I'm not aware of any other 360 camera that has it at this time. And it's pretty cool, and you can do the same thing with video editors such as Magic's Movie Edit Pro Plus, but it's a little more work, and it's actually not that easy to do unless you know how. So that's an advantage of the Rylo. Another advantage of Rylo is Hyperlapse. So you can actually use any camera, not even a non-360 camera, for Hyperlapse. But because of the Rylo's super smooth stabilization, its Hyperlapse looks extra smooth. I also created Hyperlapse from the Insta360 One, and it looks very similar, but it's a little less smooth. Now let's talk about the Insta360 One's advantages. First, image quality. The Insta360 One's image quality is significantly better than the Rylo. They're both very detailed, but the Insta360 One's dynamic range is far superior to the Rylo. In fact, the Insta360 One's dynamic range is one of its strengths, and it has one of the best dynamic range among consumer 360 cameras that I've tested. So it has plenty of detail, not just in the highlights, but also in the shadows. Whereas on the Rylo, it has great detail in the highlights, but in shadows, it's, I would say, a little bit below average. So when you compare photos and videos from the two cameras, the Insta360 One looks much more detailed, especially in the shadow areas. So for that reason, I would say the Insta360 One has much better image quality than the Rylo. The Insta360 One's photos and videos also look better to me because of the higher saturation. It's not oversaturated, it's just pleasant looking to me. Whereas with the Rylo, it looks a little bit undersaturated. So straight out of the camera, the photos and videos from the Insta360 One will look more appealing. In terms of low light performance, the Insta360 One also blows away the Rylo. The Insta360 One is one of the best 360 cameras for low light among the ones that I've tested. And you'll have a lot of detail even in really dark conditions. Whereas in the Rylo is the opposite. It's not very good in low light. Now the one caveat to that is that with the Insta360 One, with certain LED lights, you will see kind of these horizontal lines. So it might bother you, it might not. It really depends. In terms of shooting controls, the Insta360 One is also far ahead of the Rylo. Like I said, the Rylo's controls are very simple, but they're a little bit too simple. You can't control anything. It's just start and stop for video and take a photo. That's it. Whereas with the Insta360 One, it's the opposite. You have a lot of controls, much more controls than most 360 cameras. So there's manual exposure, ISO priority, shutter priority. You have auto exposure with with exposure compensation, plus minus 2 EV, I believe. You can control the ISO. You can specify the shutter speed up to 60 seconds for slow exposure, for long exposures like light painting. There's just so many things you can do with the Insta360 One. Beyond that, the Insta360 One can also be controlled wirelessly. So you can control it either with a Bluetooth remote, a dedicated Bluetooth remote, or you can control it with your smartphone wirelessly. So another advantage of the Insta360 One is you could control it by attaching it to your phone. And when you do that, you will see a live preview of what you're shooting. And not only will this let you see what you're shooting, but you can also judge the exposure. You can also, if you're trying to do a tiny planet style video as well, you can swipe the screen, resize it, move it around to make it look more like a tiny planet, so you get a better idea of what the tiny planet will look like. And these are things that you can't do with the Rylo. Insta360 One also has the advantage in terms of features. So it has, for example, bullet time, where it can shoot at 120 FPS, and it's so fast that you could spin the Insta360 One around you to kind of look kind of like bullet time. And this is something that the Rylo cannot do. Insta360 One also has live streaming at 4K. It can also stream in tiny planet mode. So this is, if you like the overcapture style video, for example, this is kind of like that, but with live streaming and with greater flexibility, so that you could even do a tiny planet view. And if you like the overcapture style video, the free capture is much more powerful than Rylo's version. So you play the video, and you hold the record, and you could zoom around while you're recording the video, as if you had this magical camera that can shoot things back in time. And you can also change to a tiny planet view like that. So that's why I would say the free capture is better than the Rylo's version of overcapture. Another point is, even though the Rylo has better subject tracking, the free capture more than makes up for it. Because with free capture, you simply have to aim the camera at your subject. Not only is that more accurate, but you can also position the subject anywhere, not just in the middle of the video like in the Rylo, but you could move it, to any of the rule of thirds intersections. So that's why it looks better to me. It also looks more natural. Another advantage of the Insta360 One is that it has software, a PC software that can stitch the photos and videos. So that makes for a smoother workflow. You can edit the photos and videos on your PC, unlike the Rylo, which doesn't have a PC or Mac app, so you're limited to using your phone. So in terms of the workflow, the Insta360 One is again ahead. Finally, you have the price. The Rylo is $499, the Insta360 One is $299. So now let's conclude. We've looked at the Rylo's strengths and weaknesses. Is it just a clone of the Insta360 One? And my answer is no. It does have some unique capabilities. So the question is, which one should you get? Well, based on my experience of owning 36 360 cameras and panoheads to date, I would say the Rylo is more of a specialist camera. So there are things that it's really good at. For example, for action, it's super stable, and it does have the unique front-back effect, and its hyperlapse is the smoothest I've seen so far. And if you're planning to use these capabilities, then the Rylo is an excellent tool, maybe the best tool for those effects. Now, on the other hand, if you plan to use a 360 camera for other uses such as photography, especially virtual tours, or street mapping, like for Google Street View, for example, then the Insta360 One would be a better tool because it could serve more needs, a variety of needs better. It's a more well-rounded 360 camera. the Insta360 One can do pretty much anything that the Rylo can do, although there are some things that the Rylo can do better. But for other things like photography and low light situations, for example, the Insta360 One will be better. If you'd like to buy the Rylo or the Insta360 One, check out the links in the description below. I'm also working on a review of the GoPro Fusion, so please subscribe so you don't miss it. And I will definitely be comparing the Fusion with the Rylo and other 360 cameras. So if you're planning to get the Rylo, there are a few accessories I would recommend. Number one is the GoPro to Q20 style adapter. That way you'll be able to use it with any selfie stick or monopod or tripod that uses a standard Q20 attachment. Because when you're shooting with 360, you really don't need to bend this. You don't need to make it face you. It's better to have it aligned with the shaft all the time, especially because you have stabilization. Another accessory I would highly recommend is this camera case that can also double as a kind of like a lens cap for the Rylo to protect it. Fits the Rylo perfectly, and you can remove the selfie stick while the Rylo is in the camera case. This also has a low pro smart lock, I think, where you can open the loop and strap it onto your belt or one of the loops in a low pro bag. You can also use this selfie stick with the Rylo's mini handle. The end of the handle is removable, so just twist it off, and you'll see a standard Q20 tripod, and you can attach this selfie stick. And it's a cool thing that the tones almost match perfectly. Here, the orange one to this reddish orange vermilion kind of thing, and this will not only extend the handle for the Rylo, but it also has a stand, a built-in stand. The handle converts to a stand. So thank you very much for watching. I'm sure you have more questions. Leave them in the comments. I'll do my best to answer them. And I'm sure you want to see more sample photos and videos. And that's why I placed a link in the description to my Rylo webpage, where you can see more detailed information about the Rylo, including sample 360 photos and videos, plus a more detailed analysis of its image quality. Thanks again, and for the best information on 360 cameras, accessories, software, and techniques, go to 360rumors.com, and please subscribe to us on YouTube and Facebook. Thanks very much. I'll see you next time.